You are listening to Artistic Finance, show 195. On today's show, we talk with tax expert Susan Lee about tax implications and best practices for freelancers. We discuss cash flow, having a will, being your own bookkeeper, and a financial health checklist, plus a financial disaster kit. Now, last week, I explained that I took a few months off from the podcast because I wanted to sleep. Now, as such, we recorded this interview months ago, and because time is traveling fast, some things already need a bit of historical context. So Susan mentions Altadena, which is a community in California. Now, last year was a terrible wildfire season in that state, and one of the fires was the Eaton Fire, which burned Altadena. So 19 people died and 9,000 buildings were burned down in that fire alone, including entire neighborhoods. Now, these fires burned for nearly a month, so they were on the news week after week after week. Abortion. Why that comes up in a tax episode, you'll just have to wait and hear. But for context, for the past few decades in the United States, the government has seen a rise in policies by white Christian nationalists. Now, one of these policies and philosophies is that females assigned at birth shouldn't have the legal right to their own health if they need an abortion. So in 2022, after 49 years of protection, the United States made the legal decision that abortion could be outlawed. So currently, 28 states of 50, including Missouri, which is where I live, have abortion bans. Now, this means that if a woman is in need of an abortion, they have to travel to one of the 9 states who have ensured that it is a legal right. Now, I'm including a link to abortion ban statistics in the show notes. I advise not looking into it like I did when I was writing this intro because it's sobering. There expectedly has been a spike in maternal deaths and infant deaths. And then if you're BIPOC, the stats are certainly even less in your favor. But anyway, let's talk about something more palatable, like the way that the government keeps its doors open, and that's by making sure us little old citizens pay our taxes. And speaking of, January 31st is approaching. Now, that is the deadline for you to send a 1099 if you have paid anybody $600 or more for services rendered. Now, you can send those super easily via online websites, but if you do need to send one, make sure you do it in the next couple weeks. Thank you to Susan because this was such a fun interview. It was refreshing to talk with somebody who is so incredibly pragmatic about the uneventfulness of taxes and at the same time clearly has an artistic sensibility and an intellect that could match the likes of Virginia Woolf. So I had a blast listening to Susan, and I hope that you do too. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
You are listening to Artistic Finance, where we help creatives learn about the business of show business.
Welcome and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Ethan Steimel. We are recording this October 20th, 2025, and the news going on today in the USA is that the government is shut down and in day 20 of that. So hopefully when you hear this, it'll be back up and running. And today we welcome to the show tax preparer and financial planner, Susan Lee. Welcome, Susan.
Hi.
So first things first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I do taxes. Now, why do I do taxes? Because I wanted to write novels. So I started doing taxes when I was a graduate student in writing. And it's just kept on that way. And I'm in New York, and I specialize if you go to my website, and I don't take new clients, so I'm not looking for business. And my website is not particularly geared to theater people, but it's geared to artists, writers, photographers, but I think it's going to be of some use to you all, especially about things like what happens if you're audited. And I love what I do because of my clientele. I have a clientele of people who know stuff I don't. So they pay me for what I know, and I get to talk to them about what they know. It's great.
That's awesome. About the writing. So what do you write?
Well, what did I write? I used to write novels and nonfiction. I haven't done that for years. I took a radio show when I stopped writing, and I did that for many years as well.
Susan, your creative personality here. What is a live event that you like to experience as an audience member, or what is a piece of art that you like?
Well, and this is going to cause a snore, I think. Well, it is. I have a passion for, you ready? 16th century landscape drawings, especially those by Peter Bruegel, Senior. And my favorite room of art is in the Kunsthistorische in Vienna, which has a bridal room.
I don't think that's a snooze at all. I think that's very specific and incredible.
Well, given what I do and who my clients are, the first question out of their mouth is, "Did you buy something, and what'd you see this year?" And so,
Now I need to know, but I want to know, have you bought one?
a bridal? Never. No bridal has been available, an actual drawing in the many years I've been involved. I think there's been one original print that's been available, and, that was way beyond me.
After we're done with this, I'm going to go look them up, and because I'm sure I've seen some of them, but
You've seen them. You know the one with the beekeepers? That's Bruegel. I think that's at the Albertina in Vienna.
amazing. All right. Well, you're also adding museum lists for me to go see.
Well, the Albertina is all drawings, I think, and prints, and the Kunsthistorisches, the paintings. That's the life in Vienna.
Wow. Okay. All right. Now your financial personality. Are you good, bad, or neutral with money and finances?
I saw that question and really thought about it, and I realized, in order to answer it, you have to know what the person who's asking it means. If you're asking, "Have you accomplished being very wealthy?" Because that's what I, as the questioner, thinks is the sine qua non of financial life, the answer is no. If you're asking, "Do you have enough to live the kind of life you want and the kind of life you can respect and the kind of life that can get you through? And is that a good thing to have done?" The answer is yes. And so the thing about money is that in this society, as I probably suspect in all societies to a greater or lesser degree, it's comparative. If you live in a world, I mean, I live in the Soho area and have done for since I'm out of graduate school, except for when I've lived elsewhere. um, it used to be you'd walk down the street or you'd sit in a cafe and people would talk about books or art or movies. Now they talk about goods they're purchasing or shows they're going to see, rock and roll shows or something like that. So it just depends on who is asking the question.
Yeah. Well, I think we have our answer. Thank you. All right. So we're talking today because you have a website called freelancetaxation.com, and I came across it. Like you said, it's not geared toward theater people per se, but when I was looking over it, it is all the things that we discuss on this show about taxes and managing your money and just everything. And what I like about it is that it's very non-magic bullet. You're not like over promising, it's not blitzed up. It's just very calmly put out there. And I think anybody can go and spend like 10 minutes on it just perusing and sort of reading the articles that you have.
10 minutes.
Well, okay, 10 minutes just to get an idea.
Hmm.
You could spend a week full-time week on it. When I say 10 minutes, I mean, you go there and the thing that's on your mind this day, you can find. Like you said, you have a thing about what to do if you're audited. Because I know anytime I have a financial thing I'm thinking about, I go to Google it and say, what's going on? But your site has a lot of the things that freelancers have to think about. And so it's all things that we identify with. Something like getting an audit is something we're worried about. But if you go to your site and you read your little article, it's very calming.
Calming. The thing about this whole subject is that it is as anxiety producing as being told you're going to the dentist and not getting Novocaine. What may be a small thing, if it had to do with something else, gets magnified here. To me, the most important thing about being a freelancer, two important things. Number one, your skill set for being a freelancer in the first place. Okay, I take that for granted. I'm not about to say, go get a this or that degree or certificate. That's not my affair. But what I am here to say is the most important thing is to be in that you understand that you're in business. You have to be your own record keeper, your own secretary, your own bookkeeper, your own everything. Now, what I have always gotten, not from everybody, but from many people, but I'm an artist. I don't want to do this. Well, okay, you don't have to do it. I mean, God is not coming down to strike you dead. But the IRS or New York State or California, they might start asking questions. And when that happens, you will think about, and I know each of you have a friend who is a dork. They keep every paper, they record every check, they record every, and they do their record keeping for the whole year ahead of themselves. You go, why wasn't I that dork? Well, I'm here to tell you I am that dork. Perhaps I keep too many records. And perhaps I'm asking you to keep too many records. The only problem with that is, you know, the story about the old advertising person who said 50% of advertising is useful and 50% is not. But the problem with that is you never know which 50% is which 50%. As a result, I have an article on my website, which is free, by the way, please, about record keeping. You've got to keep your records. You can't say, I'm an artist. I don't have to keep my records. Well, neither the IRS or the state agencies will say, oh, you're an artist. Go with God. They're not going to say that. They're going to say, oh, you took $10,000 of deductions. Denied. So you have to be your own business owner self. And you don't have to. I've just seen the results of people who've done it. Now, when you get audited, it is not a pleasant thing. Even now, they're sending out letters. And the letters say, hey, I have a mild one from New York State that one of my clients just got. And I have been warning her that she cannot take these kinds of losses. She was used to sell and now is not as much. You cannot take these kinds of losses. Sooner or later, they're going to come after you. Well, New York State did. And it's a mild audit. Asked for a Schedule C proof of income, all the invoices, and a list that the calculation spreadsheet she used that she gave me. Well, we have that, but she only has one of her invoices. We need a bunch more. And she has a big loss. They also ask her to fill out a thing about her life as a business person. Well, I know what I think is going to happen is they're going to say, hobby loss. When's the last time you made a profit? Well, that's a problem. Now, that's what an audit, a very mild audit is like. A more involved audit is where you have to prove every single receipt and payment of anything you deducted on your Schedule C. That can make people crazy because people tell me they don't have to keep their receipts. I had a client who, her father was an attorney, and she got audited. And he said to her, "You don't have to have your receipts. You have a credit card statement. That's enough." And I said, I probably thought of saying, ask him how much he wants to bet, because being in the stock market would have been nothing compared to winning on this bet. But I didn't say that. I said, I don't think that's correct. And you can choose who you want to believe in preparing for your audit, me or your Papa Bear. And she said, I think I'll choose you. And I went to the audit and I told the agent what the attorney Papa Bear said. And I said, what would you have done if I had walked in here with my credit card statements and no receipts? She said I would have disallowed every penny of them, because there's this odd notion that you only need proof of payment. You don't need what you paid for, and vice versa.
That's a good thing because I know a lot of people use their credit cards and like I know there's software that you can say, "Oh, flag this item, and put it in this sort of deduction category." And I know a lot of people do that, but just to clarify what you're saying is that's okay to do that, but you also need the receipts,
Absolutely.
which I think in today's day and age is a little bit easier sometimes because a lot of receipts are emailed. And so then you have at least the record there if you're not getting a paper one.
Okay, so I think you're right. How many people you get audited a year and a half, 2 years later? Now, I don't know about you. I don't know about a lot of your listeners, but a lot of you don't have those old emails. Then what? Then you have to go back and get every single one of them. So what you can do in the meantime is download the invoices to whatever filing cabinet you've got and have them in there so you don't lose them, and download your checking statements. People say, but it says that I went to Macy's and I bought art supplies, to which I say, but you also could have bought a mattress. Denied by the IRS. So that's why you really need both ends, because something could be anything.
And what I do, I've never been audited, and I've been filing taxes for 13 years. But what I do is I put all the receipts in PDF form, and then I put them in my folder, and then I have the tax year, and I've never had to go back to them.
That's how I am. I'm even worse. I mean, I put the invoice and the copy of the check or the credit card statement, and I put it together. I have these things full in my closets, and even then, I don't do 100% job, actually. I used to, but now I'm up at about 98%. And if I'm audited, I won't have a heart attack.
Yeah. We've dove right into this.
We haven't even
Um,
gotten to the first question.
uh, well, one question I wanted to ask is on your website, you have a section called Cashflow. And to me, cash flow is like a business term that we don't always I rarely use that word in my everyday. I can't think of a time I've used that
Oh, well, I
word.
get up in the morning and I say, "Oh, how's your cash flow?"
But I guess for us, what is cash flow and how important is it to us?
Okay, let's assume you have no cash in your account and your rent is due and you owe, what do you owe? $1,500, whatever you owe. Your cash flow has just caused you to get very upset. Second example, you have $2,500 of cash in your bank account. Your rent is $1,500. You can pay the $1,500 of rent and leave money for food. the process of getting money in and spending money and what you have at any given time is your cash flow. You can do it monthly, daily, whatever. One of the big problems that freelancers has is the first example, because freelancers have ongoing expenses and very often they've invoiced their income, but their cash flow is terrible because they haven't been paid. So they're very often late on things because the check won't come till a month later. So they either have to run up credit card bills or bank account things or borrow money somehow or not pay things. So cash flow, it's a technical term for what you all know. And you know when you've got money in the bank and you can pay your bills, your cash flow's okay.
So basically, to me, it sounds like it's checking the bank account and making sure there's enough money to cover everything.
Well, I think that's the basic. And then I think you should, not you should, I don't much like the word shoulds. If one can, ship off some of that money into a savings account. And don't really regard it as savings, but regard it as an emergency fund for if my cash flow lets me down, so that you can always pay your bills. Into that emergency fund, also start sticking money in to helping friends. I mean, in my day, it was helping friends get an abortion. Now it's back to helping friends get an abortion. But you have an emergency. It's true. I mean, if somebody lives in a state where they can't get mifepristone, I mean, really? Anyway, have an emergency fund so that you can take the money out of it and pay your rent. Being in control of your money, freelancers can never be in control of much of anything, is how I look at it. One can only control what one can control, and one can do one's best at the rest of it. Money is one of those things that you have to, or one wants to be able to navigate. And it's a practice like meditation. You have to practice being good at it. You have to practice not spending that great big check that comes in. You have to practice, and here's where the tax part comes, of putting a percentage of every freelance check into a separate account so you can pay estimates. Now, estimates are the quarterlies that freelancers who do not have taxes taken out must pay every few months. And paying estimates, it's required. There's penalties if you don't. But more than that, you're kind of in tax hell if you wait to the end of the year and owe a bunch of money that you don't have. Freelance jobs are not that you have enough to live on. Freelance jobs have to include your taxes, and you have to put aside for them.
I like that you just said, set aside a portion of the freelancer income, because I know for my whole life, some of my income has been W-2 and some has been 1099. And the way I do it is I just save a little bit of all of it. But technically, you're right. I only have to save the portion that's the 1099 part.
Maybe, maybe not. The problem with a lot of the W-2 income is that you're going to owe taxes on it. And the reason for that is if you just have a one-time small job with somebody, the withholding may not cover the bracket you're in when you add all the money together. So what you can do, there's no right answer. What percentage should I put aside? But if you look at your last year's taxes, you can see how much is withheld against how much you owe and take the difference and do that in estimates. And if you have a better year freelancing, add more. But an estimate is just that, an estimate. Now, there's some penalties, but if you pay according to what you owed last year, generally it's not very great. And you don't face April going, oh my God. Oh, and by the way, do not get an extension thinking it's an extension to pay. It's an extension to file. And if you don't pay what you owe on April 15th, number one, extension won't hold very often. But number two, you get penalized from April 15th.
Mm. That's good to know, and I'm glad you said it because we filed extensions twice in our life, and it always drives me crazy. Now, the reason we file is usually there's like a document we're waiting on that prevents us, and so but what drives me crazy is that, yes, you do have to pay your taxes on April 15th, even if you're extending 6 months. And to me, but it's like, what do you owe? You have to figure out your taxes. So that always drives me crazy because it's like you basically have to do your taxes by the 15th, even if you file an extension, which is fine. But it's just for anybody who's going to file an extension, just know that you still have to be organized by April 15th.
You have to be organized. And most people, it's the same people every year. I have a kid now who's the child, and I say kid, he's 20-some. At what point does it become pathological that he cannot get me his stuff? His father is paying my regular rate for me to remind him. I've called him. He didn't e-file. He couldn't get his act together. Now, he's a rich kid. That's a problem for rich kids, I think. I mean, being a rich kid, if you're not a rich kid, and I certainly was not a rich kid, one thinks as a child, oh, I'd love to be a rich kid. Don't. I mean, don't. If you're solidly middle class, in certain ways you're advantaged because you build up the muscle that you have to take care of yourself. This kid doesn't have that muscle, and he's not developing it quick enough. So he's the only e-filing I haven't done.
But it's going to be okay, I guess.
Is he going to go to jail? No, he doesn't owe any money. So, but the problem is, it's his whole life. If he's not e-filing, you know that he's not doing his other stuff. And does it matter? Depends how mature.
um, all right. So we were talking about cash flow, and I have a follow-up question, which is another section on your site, which says, what you make is not what you earn. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah. Ask a freelancer what they make. Let's make up a number, $75,000. Oh, well, depending where you live, $75,000 should buy you this or that or this or that. And you have some notion in your mind. But what you really earn, or vice versa, is the 75,000 minus all your expenses, business expenses. And then you discover, depending on what you do, some of you may not have very many expenses, some of you may have a lot of expenses, that the bottom number is much lower. So that in your mind, what you think you really have to spend is not what you have to spend. And remember that freelancers have to pay both sides of their Social Security, whereas W-2 people have half of it taken out before you ever see it, and the employer pays half.
My wife and I have this discussion because she's W-2, and then sometimes the question comes in like, how much did you make this year? And I always say that number that is the first number before the deductions. And then depending on who I'm talking to, if it's another freelancer, they might follow it up with, was that before deductions or after?
Well, you're talking to smart people. I mean, most people just say, "Oh, I made all this money." Now, in some cases, it's close, as I said. In some cases, it's not. And also, well, you're married to somebody on a W-2, so you're probably covered for health insurance and, her pensions or his pensions, who's ever, and their pensions. You have to pay your own pensions, put in for your own pensions. If you were single, you'd have to put in for your own health insurance. So what somebody actually earns after all those things is very different as a 1099 freelancer than as a W-2 worker.
Yeah. Because I like to say the number after deductions, but
And do you deduct health insurance for that? Do you deduct pension contributions?
Health insurance, no, but pension, yes. Well, no, I guess I don't actually. I guess I don't count that as as a deduction, but you're right.
I mean, W-2 people don't either. When you talk to a W-2 person, you can get an answer, "Well, I get $3,024 in each paycheck," but what do you make globally? And it's a much, much higher number. So this confusion, um, operates in both theaters, I think.
All right. Well, I want to bring up another thing from your website, which is the financial health checklist. And I just want to say thank you for that because I think there's so much anxiety about, am I doing well financially? Like that question, are you good, bad, or neutral with money? It's like, well, there's just so much to it. And I really like your health checklist because it can apply to anybody. And I'm like, Susan's a smart person. They know what they're talking about. Therefore, this checklist is all I need. Like if I address these things, then and I understand them, then I'm probably okay. And it sort of alleviates some fear in me. And I also like it because it doesn't include any numbers. You don't say like make this amount of money. I don't even think you have percentages in there. It's like everybody has to answer these things internally, but you're basically saying like if you're okay with these, if you understand this.
Well, I would add something else to that, and people can see the financial health list at freelancetaxation.com. The question is not just that they understand the questions, but that they do what they need to do. It's not as simple as that. Tell somebody in New York who's not making very much, "Do you have an emergency fund?" They look at you like they're nuts. I'm working to pay my rent. Tell a federal worker that, somebody who had a contract with and they're closed down, "Oh my god, I'm gonna have to move back to wherever." So, each of these things, if one regards this as, oh god, it's such a financial garden. Now, I've never had a garden in my whole life except when I was a kid and I planted lilacs. No, what did I plant? I planted some zinnias in my backyard, and I grew zinnias. It's not just planting zinnias. It's not one thing, but a real garden is a vision and doing all the different tasks in all the different areas of getting that vision. And you can't do it all at once because you won't do it all at once if you try to do it all at once. Well, next week I'm going to do this. No, you're not. Chances of success not so high because you'll go, "Oh, I can't do this." But there's a wonderful essay by somebody whose name I can't remember, called Bird by Bird, and she's from the Midwest, and, it's a story of a little boy who was sitting home sobbing, and his dad walks in going, "Oh my god, what's the matter?" The little boy says, "I can't do it. I can't do it." "What can't you do?" "I can't do my assignment." "What's your assignment?" "Pick an animal or plant or something and put together a scrapbook of them. I can't do it." So the father says, "Come on, let's go find pictures. What do you want?" "Birds." "Okay," dad says, "we're going to do this bird by bird." And that's what this is all about. Make it a goal for however, 6 months, a year, whatever, that you're going to get your tax life in order and your financial life in order. And you're going to spend how much time per week. And you're going to set yourself a bunch of goals. And if you fail at the goal, don't say, "I can't do it. I can't do it." Make the goal smaller. Set yourself a different and get so that you have some success and you keep on doing it. You should have seen when I was a little girl, I was so happy to see those zinnias. I was. I love my zinnias. And this is all zinnias or birds or whatever. Did I make up that plant? Is there a plant called a zinnia?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And this is all like that. You want this to become something. I'm not going to say it's going to give you pleasure because when I download my QuickBooks and I do it, I don't even download it the fast way because never turns out. I enter each thing to make sure that I'm not spending on things I don't want to spend on. I just dropped one of my streaming services because I couldn't remember the last time I looked. But how many of us have so many streaming and Substacks? I don't read these Substacks. So one of these days, I go, oh, I have to keep this guy. He's doing great work. But make it a choice. But you're putting yourself in an active tense about your financial life.
Yeah. Well, I love that comparison because, and also the list, because it's like, yes, if you see this list of, you have roughly 12 things, I think, but it's like, what it's good about is you can look at it and say you don't have an emergency fund, but you know that you do need an emergency fund. So if your garden isn't full and you need some zinnias or some lilacs, you may not have them now, but okay, this is what healthy financial people do. And so that's my goal, and I'm going to get there. Because also, emergency fund, I remember in college, I kept reading about these things, and it was like, have 6 months of living expenses set aside.
Listen, if you have nothing, to be told you have 6 months is to drive somebody to the fridge for a beer or to their gummies or whatever they do. Um, and so you don't say that. If somebody has nothing in the bank, nothing, you say, how much do you need to live for a few days? Have it your first goal to have that amount in the bank in the next 2 months. Make it so that you can put your arms around it and pick it up. It's not a concrete thing. It's like a beach ball. You can do it, but you gotta make the beach ball small enough so that you can get your arms around it.
I love it. All right. In this same vein of the checklist, you have something called disaster kits on your website, and you have one for business and one for personal. Can you talk about the personal one and I'm guessing we all should have these disaster kits, um, so we'll assume that, but what goes in that?
Well, the thing about it is it's a different version of the financial health list. You can find this again at freelancetaxation.com. What goes in it is all the papers you'll need: your birth certificate, your passport, your driver's license, stuff like that. If you own a home, if you have a rental agreement, if you own a car, if you want to get a job, have your college and your high school certificates. My high school isn't there anymore. If I wanted my high school certificate, God only knows. My college is, but for some of you, especially if you went to some of these art schools or design schools, some of them won't be there in 5 years. So make sure you have your certificates and even a statement of record of how you did. Each of us has our own things. Some of us have credit cards, some don't. Have a picture of your credit cards. All this stuff. Think about if you lived in Altadena and your house burned down. Your insurances, your health stuff. What would you need? So think Altadena. Altadena. I didn't even know about Altadena. One of my clients lives in Altadena. I didn't know what a wonderful place it was. But if you lived in Altadena, what do you need now? That's in essence what that is.
Yeah, because I have all these things, but they're not all together or organized, or if somebody else needed to find them, I don't know if they would be able to.
Well, the thing is, that's the thing. We're all going to die, much as some of us don't believe that. If you have all that stuff in one place, how much easier it is for your next person. Now, we can bring up subject of wills, which doesn't have to do with taxes, but if you've got to get a will. You have to get a will. You have to get a will. How many people have a will? I would betcha that a good percentage of the people who watch here that do not have a will. I would betcha for your listeners who are, in addition to being W-2 workers for theater, are also fine artists. Am I wrong about that?
Nope, you're right.
And this is going to get you upset. I know because it's gotten every single one of my clients, when I bring it up, upset. Who's going to be artistic executive? Who's going to be a literary executive? What's that mean? When you die, say your spouse, but my spouse doesn't like what I do. So you think she or he's going to spend their life putting together your artistic estate? I don't think so. You've got to have somebody who is going to take care of your artwork. Now, everyone has fantasies that afterwards their work is going to suddenly sell to museums. Not going to happen as a rule, if it didn't happen before. But you want maybe somebody to try. And that's what an artistic or literary executive does. You want, and very often, the spouse or whoever loved the person's work. I had a client, and now both the poet and the executor are dead, but I could swear that that executor really not only kept the poet publicly known, that she expanded it. And she worked incredibly hard to do it. So that's what that is.
All right. Common freelancer financial mistakes. We talked about filing the extension and having to pay taxes if on April 15th, if you do that. Another one you wrote was not reporting a missed 1099.
Yeah. How much did you make this year? Well, I got 1099s for $60,000. Nice. And what about the one for 20 that came 2 months after you filed? Or what about the one that didn't come? Is the IRS going to use your 1099 as what they think your income is? No, they're going to go through your bank accounts. Your bank account says 100 of deposits. Your 1099 says 60. The IRS says you owe on the other 40. My aunt gave me $10,000. Well, where's the copy of the check and the letter saying it was a gift with no strings attached? I don't have it. She died. Now, it used to be that in Soho, the phrase under the table meant it didn't count. Maybe it still does, but it does count.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you're saying that too, because I've always been a thing where there's this thing where if it's $600, you get a 1099 cent, or you're supposed to. But if it's under that, you don't necessarily. I've always made sure to just put down, like, those amounts are small. But I've always put them down just because I'm always worried the IRS is going to come after me for some reason. I don't know why. This is just always a worry of mine. I know people who won't put, if they get $400, they won't list that in their income.
Well, fine. And that's good until they're caught. And then when they're caught, they squeal. Very loudly, actually. Why are they coming after me? I'm too small. I'm too big. I'm too good. I'm too whatever. This is style. Somebody who's late is late with their taxes. Somebody who fudges with their taxes. Somebody who, and it's just personality. Somebody who is meticulous with their taxes. And can some people get away with it? Well, there used to be a butcher in this neighborhood who would give my dog bones. I like this butcher. One day I walk in, he looked like he had died. And he was still standing there. And I said, "What's the matter with you?" And he said, "I'm in trouble with the IRS. I never paid in for Social Security." Well, the man did look like he suddenly was on his deathbed. And I do think it hastened his death. I do believe that. And they finally worked out something, and I'm not his tax person, and if I were, I wouldn't be telling you this story. Or I wouldn't handle it, actually, that sort of thing. But seeing him on that day where he got caught, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. I mean, one year I used to keep I used to keep, um, each thing by pencil, and I had a lot more clients than I do now, so it would go on for page after page after page. And so I was looking back at my pages for the previous year, and I went, "Oh my God, I skipped one." And I did, and I had to amend my own taxes because I skipped one. And I amended it, and then they charged me interest, and, nothing ever happened. But that's my personality, where I did what I thought I should do. And after that, I numbered every page. And now I have every single penny I get in on a spreadsheet, and I add it up. Now, it could happen I forget to put something in, but I have a corresponding entry in my software, and so then I have to add it to my spreadsheet.
Wait, did you miss one line item or a whole page of line items?
A page.
Okay. Either way, good work. Yeah, but you can sleep well at night.
No, I can't sleep well, but that's something else.
Different issue.
Yeah, different issue. But do I wake up thinking, let's not get into politics? Because if we get into politics, mm-mm, um, I'm concerned about what's going on. So that can keep me up at night. But being honest, no, no. I'm the person people come to if they want to sleep at night, and they know it. I'm not somebody who not won't do it.
I think that's good. I think that's what you want with a tax person.
No, that's what you would want.
What I would want.
Many other people do not want that. Look, there's playing with the probabilities and playing with the possibilities. And the probabilities year by year is the audit rate is low and nothing's going to happen. Possibility is that something might happen. I go with the possibility. There are those people who want to go with the probability. And they say, the IRS is closed down, nothing's going to happen. Well, fine.
Yeah. It's a personality difference because we have had some people on the show who have been audited multiple times, and they're just like, yeah, when the IRS says something, then we do the audit." And to me, I'm like, I I want to avoid the audit at all costs.
So do you ask them how much time did it take?
I haven't asked them. I in fact did not ask any follow-up questions about it.
Well, the problem with being audited is not only the emotional strain, but the amount of time it takes out of somebody's life. It's not just getting the receipts and the invoices and doing all that. It's the fear that most people have. And I try to win my audits. I mean, really. So I'm quite the taskmaster at getting all the stuff. And doing taxes is like where money hits the road for a lot of people. And one's whole financial ego, zeitgeist, whatever you want to call it, gets triggered about taxes. And an audit is the flashpoint for taxes. So an audit can be a very difficult thing for people.
I can imagine. Let's hope that well, you'll have to deal with it more, I'm sure, but let's hope that I never have to deal with it. Um, Thank you so much for doing this and for going over our time. I very much appreciate it.
Perfectly fine. And I wish you and all your people who watch this a good financial life and doing their taxes as best they can and doing it, keeping it in mind throughout the year so it's not a horrible thing at the end of the year.
That's it for this week's episode. My takeaways are understand that you are in business. You can pretend like you don't know or care how business or finances work, but since those things aren't going away, it'll make things a lot easier if you don't run away from them and instead accept your fate as your own bookkeeper and business owner self. Susan mentions she keeps meticulous records and that perhaps she is asking her clients to keep too many records, but that's because she knows it's easy to address an audit, etc., if you have the records. Now, I'll mention that I said that I put all my receipts into PDF and file them away. That's not entirely true. I have an arbitrary rule that if something costs more than $100, or if it is definitely a business expense, I will make a point to turn that receipt into a PDF and file it away. So, for example, I'm working on an upcoming show and I needed to move some projectors. So I borrowed a truck, I was moving the projectors, and I had to fill up for gas for $34. I scanned that receipt, turned it into a PDF, and put it into my receipts folder for 2025, because this was in December. But that is because it is a business expense and it's for a specific show. Another example is that I purchased QLab, which was $600. So I have PDF'd that receipt and I've put that into my deductions list. Now, I'm also going out of town for a Lort D contract this summer, and that contract doesn't have any per diem included. So I'm not going to save and itemize my food receipts. And that's because there's a GSA rate that I can write off without having to save my receipts. So I'm not going to be keeping those records. I'm saying all this to say that when I say things like I'm saving my receipts, I'm selectively only saving the ones that I know are business. And specifically, I'm more strict about it the more expensive it is. And while Susan and every tax expert we've ever had on the show always emphasizes that we must save the receipts for everything, I don't actually. So, for example, part of utilities we are able to write off for a home business expense. However, I know that those amounts are in my emails if I'm ever audited. And I would also argue that utilities on a credit card statement should count because there's no other good or service that a utility can be. You can't purchase a mattress from the electric company. But I digress on that. I'll also say that I do review my credit card statement when I'm compiling my list of deductions. The reason I do that is because receipts come in different shapes and sizes, and sometimes the price versus the final price with tax is difficult to locate. Now, the credit card knows the absolute total, so it's easier for me to peruse that list than to check all the actual receipts. I'm not saying this all to disagree with Susan because, as we all know, Susan is correct and Susan is the expert. Proof of payment isn't enough for the IRS, yes, but I want you to know that when I say things like I save and PDF my receipts, know that I'm doing it selectively in a way that I've built up over the years, knowing what I deduct on my taxes and what I think I'll be able to easily dig up on the off chance that I get audited. So if that does happen, I will be very worried about an audit, but I do sleep well at night knowing that if that does happen, I know where my receipts are and then where to get the ones that I'm going to need to get. Cash flow, a word I avoid because it means you have cash flowing, and I don't always feel like that describes my life. But Susan mentioned cash flow is important for freelancers because we are paid sporadically, which means that we have to have cash reserves and we have to have them for taxes, but we also have to have them to pay all our bills because often we don't get a check for a long time after the work is completed. How someone handles finances is a personality trait. So if they miss deadlines, they're going to miss tax deadlines. If they're disorganized, they're going to be disorganized with taxes. This reminds me, because I'm a teacher now, that my students, I know they don't appreciate when I harp on little details over and over, but that's the thing. If you miss the details now, you're going to miss them your whole life. So if you're turning in your homework late, that means you're going to be turning in lighting paperwork late in real life, which, as Susan says, is an option. God is not coming to strike you down, but it does mean that people aren't going to want to work with you because they can't rely on you. So will it be the end of life? No, but it will limit your opportunities without you even realizing it. Report missing 1099s. This is your reminder that sometimes theaters don't send a 1099, and this could be because you moved and it doesn't get forwarded to you, or because they just don't send one. But it shouldn't matter because you should know what gigs you've had for the year. And if you don't see a 1099 come in, be sure to include that amount in your income anyway. Now, this once happened to me and I reported that amount, But then the next year, the company sent me a 1099. But I took it to our accountant and I said, hey, look, here it is. I reported this last year. He agreed with me and we didn't report it when I got the 1099. So that wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a huge amount of money. But if there was an audit or something, I would have the paper trail. And speaking of audits, Nicole and I got a letter from the IRS this year that said we didn't file our 2024 taxes. Now, we of course panicked and we reached out to Elton, our accountant, and he said, look, I have confirmation that the IRS got the return 5 days before the deadline. So we then called the IRS. We explained it. We said, hey, look, like the money we owed you went out of the account. We have that receipt right here. So they put us on hold for a while and they eventually came back and they said, you are correct. We got your return. You can ignore this. So I'm just sharing that because it was terrifying, as you can imagine. And it wasn't even an audit, but we had done everything correctly. And yet we were still terrified. Like, oh my gosh, what is going on? What did we miss? Financial garden, a brilliant concept. Bird by bird, also a brilliant concept. Just the past few weeks, I have been storyboarding projection ideas for this upcoming show. Now, it's a projection-heavy musical, and it's quite a lot, but I just went scene by scene, song by song, and I worked my way through it. Now, throughout this show, as I'm interviewing people on artistic finance who are incredibly skilled and organized with their finances, I often fall into the mindset of, wow, I wish I were as good at the business side of things as this person. But the business side of things is just a garden. So it's constantly growing and evolving. And sometimes maybe like the mulch wastes away and we need to, bring it back. There's also seasons. So sometimes things are really flourishing and other times things are dead for months at a time. And it's all okay because at any given time, I can put a little effort into certain aspects. So if I need to save for more retirement, I can focus on that. Or if I need a will, that's important. I can take some time and do that. It's all just part of being human and being a freelancer. And speaking of that, wills, Susan says, you got to get a will. You got to get a will. Now, I don't like to admit this because back on episode 18 with costume designer Cynthia Winstead, this was 5 years ago, we discussed the importance of wills, and I said I was going to go make one. And I started to do that, but because I'm a little bit too frugal at times, I decided not to use one of those super easy lawyer websites that will blast out a will in 10 minutes. No, instead, I looked up the rules of New York State and I found a template and I tweaked that will and the health directives, etc. And I printed it out and all Nicole and I had to do was go get it notarized. But did we? No, it sat on the kitchen table and then we moved apartments and it got lost in the shuffle and then it was out of date. And now here we are and we have a toddler, but we don't have a will. Now this problem compounds a little bit because once a week or so, Nicole keeps telling me we need to get our wills made, which means she needs me to go print out the template and then have us go notarize it. So hopefully she's not going to listen to this episode because she's definitely going to be like, Ethan, I've been saying this for the past year. Okay. All right. So here is all of our financial garden goal for this month. And that is if you're listening and you don't have a will, get one, make one. So in the next 2 weeks, by the end of January, you are going to get your will printed and notarized. And if you do that, please let me know, because it will be a kick in the pants to make sure that Nicole and I get our wills together. All right, come on, everyone. We're all in this together, baby. All right, that's it for my takeaways. A couple miscellaneous thoughts before I let you go, things I just want to talk about. So the first being high school theater. So this past weekend was the International Thespian Conference for Missouri. The sound professor at Webster University, where I'm teaching, encouraged me to run a lighting workshop because she said that there's no lighting workshops and that they really needed one. So I actually ran two. One was about all the paperwork involved in lighting, and the other was about color in lighting. And that was co-taught with lighting designer Denise Chavez from St. Louis University, who did most of the work, I will admit, actually all of the work, but did an absolute killer job. And we had 50 people at each of those sessions. And That, by the way, is just a departure for me because my biggest class at Webster has 8 students in it. So 50 was like, whoa. But anyway, it was a quite fulfilling weekend because I saw that the students, as well as the high school teachers, wanted to know about lighting. Now, I mention this because if you're listening and you are a college professor, I would suggest trying to make it a priority to attend your state's high school thespian conference and run a workshop or two on lighting, because they would be appreciative. You don't necessarily have to take a console or a bunch of equipment. Like I did one on paperwork because I didn't want to do those things. But there's a need for it and people would so love it. Anyway, so if that ever shows up as something you can do, go do it. All right. Another thing I wanted to talk about was unions. And this is because there was a news story the last day or so that the president of the United States flipped off somebody at a Ford assembly plant. Now, rumor has it that the company is letting that person go, but they are part of a union. And of course, the union is going to fight for this person to keep their job or be compensated if they are let go from the job. Now, this worker did disrupt a presidential visit, but that's not a crime, and it wasn't harmful to anybody, and arguably it was hilarious. So why am I talking about this? Because I often say that I don't know that being a member of the Theater Designers Union, USA 829, has benefited me. And I'm often referencing the pension, which I'm not vested in, and then the low fee contracts that I've worked on, which not necessarily a union problem, but it's, I like to gripe. But I often forget that there are other benefits to the union, like labor protections. And that is, if I get into a dispute with a theater or a producer, the union will fight for me. Sort of like when COVID happened, because I was on some union contracts, I got paid some money for jobs that I never actually designed. And I didn't do that on my own. And for sure, the contracts I had that were not union, I definitely didn't get paid out anything on. So this news story just got me thinking that it's a very powerful thing to know that a group of people, your union, will back you up. And a group of people together, we have lawyers and things that will help us. So say what you want about unions and or about the decorum of people calling out a president during a visit. But if the unions didn't exist, that person would absolutely have no protections for their job and their livelihood. So thank you, USA 829, for existing and also for letting me be a member. All right, the final thing I want to say is that if you are listening this far into the episode, you are a superhuman and a super listener. And if you happen to be a Patreon patron, I want to say thank you very much for letting me keep this podcast running and up and publicly available to everyone. And if you're listening and you want to be a patron and support that, and arguably I feel like becoming a patron of this show could be a deduction if you're a freelancer. Because, we're talking about the career, we're learning. Anyway, talk to your tax professional about that. I can't commit to that. But anyway, if you want to help out and help pay for this, patreon.com/artisticfinance, I would be so grateful and so honored. But anyway, you do you. That's it for today. Until next time, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance, where we interview successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire the creative community. To access our show notes and resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.